Thanks so much for being on with us today, John.
Thank you, Hugo. Glad to do it.
Yeah, it's funny because we've seen you around the block for the last few years, but it was just a few weeks ago where we both realized we were in the same circles in consumer affairs and lending tree like over a decade ago, which is
Yeah.
such a small world. But I think it also validates how big of nerds we are with lead gen, since we haven't really left lead generation uh, in over a decade. So that's great. Thanks
Either
for
we
joining us.
love it, either we love it or we're, chained to it, one or the other.
It could be both. So we got lots to cover today, but I want to start off with a provocative question. Well, I think it's provocative. What's the biggest risk right now for attorneys who are buying leads?
Not knowing where their leads come from. So I think that's the number one risk we see, not just in legal, but across all verticals, right? So you find somebody who's like, hey, I can sell you X number of leads for this much money. And that seems like it's a good deal. Maybe it's the first time you're getting into lead generation, or maybe it's the first time you're expanding into a different channel. Um, but without understanding where those leads are coming from, you have no idea what you're buying. Um, and and I like to say that when you're buying leads, you're buying that person's compliance program.
Mm,
Right? So you are reliant on the person you're buying to make sure those leads are being driven in a compliant way, to make sure that you're uh, going to have as much access to using those leads as possible, whether that's calling or emailing or texting. So I think that's probably the number one mistake I see people make. And they come in and they say, hey, we were buying leads from this partner. We couldn't track it. And now we have a TCPA claim or we got a customer complaint. And we don't know what to do. So that's the number one thing I see.
so let's kind of like do an overview of how
Sure.
a lead is generated. And this is
Yeah.
like lead gen 101. Let's call it there's media dollars or which can translate into traffic,
Yep.
right? They can buy traffic, but you can also like get free, quote unquote, free traffic from other websites that are driving traffic to a website. And then of all that traffic can be interested in an offer, put in their name, number, and email. Already, right there, there's a compliance requirement
Yep.
or consent.
Yep.
So before that lead gets even into a marketplace, that one area of compliance, it seems like the largest area of exposure in not getting consent.
Yes. Yeah.
It,
And I would say that that's right. Um, Either let's just call that step a form, right? Because that's what it is, right? Like you're going to get name, telephone number, email address, whatever. There's a lot that can happen before the form. There's a
Mhm.
lot that can happen after the form, but that form is kind of the hub of our compliance, right? Because we want to make sure that the consumer is consenting to be contacted by you on this side, right? After you get this lead. Um, I don't want to say we don't care what happens beforehand,
Sure.
but we can make the argument that if you're filling out this form and it's got the right consent language, that consent language can cure a lot of ills over here. Maybe things that you've done wrong, or not you've done wrong, but things that were done incorrectly or whatever, right? But that form and that consent language is the key. Like that is um, that's where the magic happens, right? Because it says, "I Hugo allow John to call me.
Hmm.
I Hugo allow John to text me. I Hugo allow John to use artificial intelligence voice, right? Um, and that consent, the reason it's important is because it says who can contact the consumer, and it says how they can contact the consumer, and what they can contact the consumer about, right? So you want to make sure that those three things are aligning with what you're doing.
Yeah. So I just look at that supply chain of
Yep.
data, the dollars, the traffic, the websites that they're on, the form disclosures, and then even after the fact, what we see lead generators do, the third party ones that sell leads, is after they receive the leads, then they do their own calling,
Mhm.
their own remarketing, their own texting, their own emailing, their own qualifying. And then it gets into a marketplace where you may or may not be a buyer of said lead.
Yep.
Are you suggesting that anyone who's buying leads needs to know the whole supply chain documented for every single lead that they buy?
Yeah. I mean, I do. I think that's right. And I don't necessarily like, I would love for you to know every single step. And I would love for you to have reviewed every single website and every
Right.
single ad, right?
Right.
But that's not the world we live in.
Right.
What I do want is that you're not ignorant of it and you're not willfully ignorant of it, right? So you're not
Mm,
completely ignoring it. When I work with clients that are onboarding new lead vendors, I say, look, how are you driving the majority of traffic? Show me the marketing materials that you're having the most success with right now. Show me the form that you're coming through. Show me the consent language, right? Because we want to make sure that all aligns, right? We want to make sure that this customer saw uh, an MBA ad. They went to an MBA landing page. They saw a consent form about MBA, and I'm going to call them about their MBA, right?
yep.
Not, uh, I saw how to get free government money. I saw how to get, um, you know, a guide on how to get Section 8 housing. And oh, wait, here's a form about my motor vehicle accident. And so now I'm calling you, right? I always like to say that the one thing we want to avoid if we're buying leads is a what the hell moment, right?
Mm,
Um, that consumer, when you call them or contact them, they should never say, what the hell is this about?
right.
Right? They should know Hugo is calling me because at some point I filled out a form that said I was in a car wreck in Birmingham, right? So I know that when Hugo says, "Hey, John, I saw that you filled out our form about your car wreck. I'd love to get some more information." Right?
Right.
Like that's the perfect world scenario. Um, and the other thing I like to tell people, Hugo, is that this is really a pretty easy process. It's a two-step process. It's tell the consumer what you're going to do or what's going to happen, and then do that. Right?
Right.
And that when there's a disconnect between those two things, that's when you have real compliance problems.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this, we saw this with a client who I'll try to simplify this as much as possible, but they were buying leads
Mhm.
and they wanted us to also do auditing of their calls. And we heard some calls and we heard that many of the consumers that were being contacted by this PI firm thought or had only interacted with an auto insurance website, which then made it really obvious that this third party lead generation company was driving traffic to an auto insurance website, getting a bit of information that maybe some of them had been in a wreck,
Mhm.
getting those wrecked data leads, then flipped to a PI lead. The firm calls a consumer. The consumer's upset. They feel like they've been baited and switched. The whole interaction's a mess. Now there's incentivized traffic that people at the firm aren't even privy to.
Mhm.
I mean, when there's so many creative and deceiving ways to generate leads and traffic, why even do it when there's so much risk and exposure? Like even with the TCPA penalties, they seem so damning. Can you walk us through that? Like, why even do it if this could bankrupt your business?
Yeah, and I think, like, that's a great example you just gave because what it is it's ignorance in the truest sense of the word,
Right.
right? It's law firms or I mean, that's who we're talking about, but lead buyers who don't understand what they're getting into and what they're buying, and they don't understand the process. And like,
Right.
they don't understand that they are literally buying risk and they are buying enough risk. They are paying low dollars for risk that will shut their business down. And I think that you and I have talked about this before offline of just like in the legal space, we don't really have what I call a head on the wall, right? There's no giant trophy from a TCPA lawsuit that says, you know, Henson Legal got shut down because of TCPA issues, right? We have that in other verticals. Like there's mortgage companies, there's insurance companies,
Yeah.
and so because no one thinks it's happening, that's happened here. I think that people are turning a blind eye to it, and it's has. I mean, there's been some class actions, and there's been cases involving law firms or law firm vendors, right? For doing this. So it's not a this is not a area that is risk free just because we're in the legal space.
Yeah, even a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about um, like there's like lead fingerprint technologies that give like a unique token to
Mhm.
validate that it's gone through all these steps, but that even lead vendors fraudulently create these tokens on the assumption that you're not going to do your diligence on these tokens.
Yep.
Um, so at what point do you even choose the right vendor? I mean, is there any central authority or is there a council that has said these are the right referral partners or lead vendors? Because this seems like so high risk.
Yeah. And it is, and I think that that is one of the problems is that there's no like seal of approval, right? Of like, hey, this company is been vetted. Uh, there's organizations that companies could, you know, join. And when you join, you say, oh, yeah, we do everything the right way. I also know of some of those organizations that there's people in there that I wouldn't let my clients buy leads from because I know they're not doing it the right way, but they paid their $500 or whatever. And so now they say it, right? So I think if I was going to do this, if I was going to start buying leads to um, I would want to talk to lead vendors and I would want referrals, right? And I would go to those referrals and say, hey, I know you're working with Hugo. Tell me what you know. Tell me like how's your lead quality? Have you had any compliance issues? What what is what's the general experience? Um Now that's fraught with issues, right?
Yeah.
If for nothing else, um nobody ever wants to say, you know what? I don't know what the hell I'm doing either. So it seems good, right? But
Right.
but at least do some due diligence, right? And like I said, say where are you driving most of your leads from? Like, are they Facebook ads? Are they call transfers? What is the consumer seeing through this process?
Yeah.
Uh,
Also ask if they're being solicited. Like we
yeah,
saw another third party lead vendor who had a call center in El Salvador that was doing outbound to millions of do not call records. Obviously, they're outside US jurisdiction, so they feel enabled to do whatever they want. They generate leads through a US intermediary, and now they don't realize that they've just inherited all sorts of outbound solicitation exposure, professional conduct violations, legal violations. It's like it's like, it just makes me wonder why even do it,
yeah,
when there's so much risk. But obviously, to your point, there are great companies that do go out of the way to explain their supply chain.
yeah,
And I think it's great advice. Just do the work that most attorneys aren't doing in these transactions. Like ask the tough questions, ask about the whole supply chain. Tell them that you're really serious about buying up all their inventory, but you need to know that there's that no one's is inheriting risk in any of
yeah,
it, right?
yeah. Like, I mean, I know of like law firms who take more time ordering pins with their logos on it than
Yeah,
thinking about where they're buying leads from.
yeah,
But I do want to talk about what you just said. That scenario of the offshore call center. There is lots of cases, right, of where a lead buyer, the end buyer, right, has said, you know what, that's an offshore uh, company, and therefore we can't be responsible for them, and you can't sue us for TCPA. And courts have routinely said, you're buying the leads. Like they're calling either on your behalf, or you know that you're getting the leads from them, and therefore you're responsible for these actions.
Yep.
And there's cases of companies paying tens of millions of dollars because of offshore leads and offshore call centers. So like that is not like you weren't suggesting this, and I'm not saying you were, but like that's not a clever workaround, right? Like
Mhm.
it is for the call center.
Yeah.
It's not for you, you know, as one buying leads.
So I think that's a huge area of risk. It sounds like in these transactions. For those not privy to like the TCPA, can you just give us a cliff notes on the
Sure.
TCPA?
Yeah. So TCPA, it has two main portions, right? It is the what we call the regulated technology portion that's using auto dialers, AI voice, pre-recorded messages, and the DNC
Hmm.
portion. Most of the stuff we're seeing lately, other than AI voice, which is its whole beast, is DNC, right? So, like, what DNC is, do not call, and we have a national do not call registry, and people can put their phone numbers on it, and you can't call anyone on that do not call list unless you have consent or a couple of other exemptions, right? So, when you go and you fill out a form and it says, "Hey, I know I'm filling out this form. I want to be contacted by these people about this issue," and that is going to be generally be sufficient. Obviously, there's a little bit more evidence there, but like that's the gist of that consent for the DNC. And you want to make sure you have the consumer's consent to call them, right? And why you're calling them has different um, requirements, right? So, like if you're calling just purely informational versus marketing, so the example I always give is your pharmacy, right? So you go to Walgreens, Walgreens texts you and says, "Hey, your prescription's ready." That's informational, right? Walgreens texts you and says, "Hey, gummy bears are 20% off this week," right? Great. That's marketing. What happens when it's your prescription's ready and don't forget gummy bears are 20% off this week,
Mm,
right? That's considered marketing, right? And so when you do that, that needs prior express written consent, right? If you're going to use any technology, and you still have to have the express consent of the consumer from the DNC side. So that's why it's important to get that proper consent and to understand what you're going to do with these leads, right?
yeah.
So that's where the TCPA comes in. And the reason everybody's concerned about it is because TCPA has a private right of action, and you see a lot of class actions. Uh, it's a $500 to $1,500 statutory penalty. So if you're making 1,000 calls a day at $500 a call, that's $500,000 a day, right? And
Right.
so, like, the risk is huge.
Yeah, and it goes back to just understanding your disclosures to consumers for opt-in consent. I know we're talking a lot about calling, but the TCPA also has language and rules around texting and emailing as well. To your point about like the CVS example, so what are the areas of exposure that most attorneys aren't aware of aside from non-disclosures there?
Yeah. I would say that probably the biggest issue is uh, not understanding do not call requirements, right? And so, not properly putting people on a do not call list.
Yeah.
I would say the good news for most lawyers, especially ones that are buying leads, they know that it's a very, uh, especially in a single incident lawyer, like an MBA, right? It's a very limited time window, right? So it's not like you're calling these people repeatedly over and over and over again for months on end.
Hmm.
Now, in a mass torts, you may be,
Hmm.
right? Because you're trying to build your class and you're just trying to get the person on the phone, and you know that you've got 60, 90 days to do so. So there is some risk there. Uh, but handling DNCs is super important.
I am curious with the DNC though, like even let's say someone adds himself to the DNC, the do not call list, the registry, that's the federal level, um, but opts into a lead form. Can they
Yeah.
still be contacted even though they're on the DNC?
Yeah. If they've opted into the form,
Okay,
yes.
so there's some overriding action. Okay, cool.
Yes. But the flip side is true too, though, right? Like if I've consented on December 1st and then I've put myself on the DNC on January 1st,
Hmm.
you can't call me after that. You should be scrubbing in the DNC. So,
We have a
um,
question here from,
yeah,
thank you for that. And Luis Fernando Castillon is asking, in our process, when referring clients to other firms, we always ask the client for authorization to share his information. Is that enough?
I would say, yeah, probably, right? Obviously, devil's in the details. But one of the issues, we talked about informational text, right? There's a lot of case law around informational that as long as it's related to the same transaction, right? Then that's an informational call. So, for example, let's use Luis here. Luis is doing motor vehicles. Uh, Hugo, I'm going to transfer you to this other law firm. They do motor vehicle accidents in your area. That person calls you and says, "Hey, Hugo, I know that you've got had a motor vehicle accident. Can we talk?" Right? That's
Right.
probably informational. And so that process you just described is going to be sufficient.
Okay. Got it.
Now, the flip side of that is you've done all your MBA calls, you've made all those transactions. How can we now monetize our database? Let's go throw it to car insurance companies.
Right.
Now that becomes difficult, right? Because that's pure marketing at that point.
Got it. So what would you say to the attorneys who are saying federal government's not looking at SMBs under $10 million with these violations? They're looking for the big the big banks. They're looking for big insurance companies. I'm not even on the radar. My exposure is limited, despite what it's being discussed here. Like, what do you tell attorneys who think that their claims might be too small?
I would disagree. Um,
Are you
that
seeing them right now? I'm just curious, like, so can you walk us through, like, the non-marquee headline cases that
yeah.
you're seeing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's not like it's something every day. Like, I mean, I had a client like bluntly get a demand letter the other day for 6 calls.
Wow.
Yeah.
Outbound calls.
Yep.
So when they get it when they get a letter like this, are they likely to discover more calls which will result in more penalties, or is it just the initial calls causing
It's
penalties?
generally a fishing expedition, right? Of like, "Hey, you called me 6 times. Who else have you called 6 times?" Right? And what happens is you have people who are like, "You know what? I'll write you a check right now for $5,000. Please go away." Right?
Got it.
So it's a money grab, right?
So were you
And
talking like the attorneys that what do we call them? The predatory, lawyers looking like they're trying to find violations in everyone's supply chain?
yeah, yep,
Okay. Got it.
yeah,
So this is very real. This is like even though the federal government may not come after you, you could have. I saw it at a prior line in a prior role where you and I had probably worked together at one point,
yeah,
but where there was a law firm in San Diego. For I was running marketing for a call center, and this call center also got a similar demand letter for, I think it was $25,000 to go away. And the call center had received it maybe like 4 times. And the company I was at was fairly small. So this happens all the time. There's one right here that says, one question, I'm kind of scared right now that I may have purchased some bad leads. What can I do at this point? How can I clean this up? Great question.
that is a great question. I mean, the safest thing is don't call them, right? Like, figure out another way to contact them, whether that's email or something else. The other thing to do is, what I would do is I would probably scrub those through the do not call list,
Mm,
right? Get access to that, scrub them through the do not call list. There's companies that do that. And then you can at least you won't lose them all, right? But you've also mitigated some risk, right? Of that all these numbers are on the do not call list. So those that's probably the best step I could explain to you is just scrub them through a do not call list.
yeah, that's awesome. So, and we're not trying to instill fear here.
Mm.
That's not what we're trying to accomplish here. What we're trying to do is, provide some mitigation techniques to create awareness of how you can talk to these companies, a little more, and ask for more transparency, because the transparency is where where the buying confidence comes in, right?
Yep.
Obviously, the most fail-proof way of generating leads is generating them yourself, right? Because it's your media dollars. You can work with an agency or a consultant or an in-house person, but it's all in a vacuum. It's in your command from the very beginning to the very end. But that's not the only way. There are some great vendors out there that do go out of their way to be transparent about their supply
Yeah.
chain. I think what you're trying to suggest is if someone's being shady about this information, it's like a huge red flag. Like
Yep.
we should be getting some basic information about how these leads are generated.
Yeah. I have an issue with companies that say, "Well, we don't want to give our URLs
The
away."
cost.
Like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? You're not going to tell me what URLs you're driving to? Like,
Right.
I'm not going to go buy the URL and I'm not going to go bid against it. Like,
Right.
I don't care that much, but I want to know what the customer's seeing.
There's a
So I,
question here about they're asking, yeah, is there a question I can ask right now that I can ask these companies that will help me know if my leads will be okay?
yeah, the number one question I tell people to ask is show me your consent language. And at a minimum, show me the page the consumer saw that consent language on. That is the
Right.
bare minimum. And it is. It's going to cover a good portion of your risk. Again, like we talked about, you have two funnels, right? Um, you may have some up funnel risk, but again, it cures a lot of it.
Let's talk about the clients you take on. I would imagine that based on these questions, there's probably a percentage of viewers who are buying leads who are probably wondering if they need to do some kind of third party audit with someone like you or a comparable firm or attorney. Walk us through what that looks like and feels like.
Yep. So I have two basic buckets of clients in this space. I have lead generation side, right? So buyers and sellers. And then on the other side, I have the technology providers. I have a lot of AI voice clients. But for our lead generation clients, if you're a lead buyer, what I do is I say, look, I want to see your site, right? How are you getting traffic now? Is it coming to your site? Is it first party leads that you're driving? Are you buying what I call single buyer leads, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you're using a third party, but everything says Hugo Gomez, right?
Yeah.
Or are you buying shared leads, right?
Right.
And let's understand what those risks are there and how that breakdown is. Every Hugo, everything's 80-20 rule, right? 80% of your traffic's coming from a certain percentage of vendors. So let's really dig into those. Like,
Right.
let's understand that. Because you probably got I have been doing this long enough and seen big enough companies, even big companies are only like 5 vendors, right? That they're buying them vast majority of their leads from. So we can figure that out, right? We can go through and look at that and say, hey, because we looked at your language, uh, we'd really like you to make these changes, right? Or you're presenting it this way. Could you present it this way, right?
Yeah.
And and have those conversations with your vendors, and then you have to understand whether or not that risk is worth it. So yeah, we do those audits from the path. I also like to listen to calls if it's possible, because um, you gave that great example earlier of the auto insurance. People don't understand how many compliance uh, issues they can find in listening to calls. They don't sound like compliance issues, but if you listen to it and you understand what's going on, if a customer's confused on why you're talking to them, like
Mhm.
there's a compliance issue there. They got driven from some site or some transfer that makes no sense to them and why they're talking to you.
Yeah.
Uh, and we see, we like to do that a lot and say, hey, listen to these 20 calls. We had a handful of people saying this, and those are coming from this lead source. So we may want to dig in there. Right.
That's fantastic. Yeah, John, this has been awesome. I think we just scratched the surface of just disclosures and TCPA forms, but there's so much there
Yeah.
with risk but I think it just goes back to common sense. Just know your vendors,
Yeah.
not just in lead gen, but just every vendor you're that's
Yeah.
on your PNL. Just know how they operate. Make sure that you're using your intuition, that you're involved. Don't pass this on to a marketing director, no matter how seasoned they are. I remember being in past roles where I was head of marketing, and even I never like to make these kind of decisions on my own. I always like to involve the CEO and COO because it's just too much risk for everyone if done the wrong way. So thank you, John. If someone wants to reach you, I would imagine you're probably going to get a few emails out of this. What's the best email to contact you?
The best email is john at henson-legal.com. And also, I am very active on LinkedIn. My wife says I'm too active on LinkedIn, but if you can find me there too.
Amazing. Thank you, John, so much, and appreciate your time. To everyone else watching, we'll be back in 5 minutes. We're going to answer some other questions that are pending in the Q&A. We'll give you some more information on the book, and also we're getting a lot of questions about our services. We're not going to take too much time. This isn't about selling our things or wares, but we'll give you a brief rundown on what's available in 2026 with Abogados Now services. So we'll be back in 5 minutes. Thanks, John.
Thank you.